Hello, SolarLune here, and here's another Let's Discuss video talking about dynamic difficulty sliding. I had this idea maybe a couple of years ago, just kind of thinking about it, but I never really made a video about it or talked too much about it. And it's kind of similar to this video that EpicNameBro made. I'll put a link in the description where he talks about basically modal difficulty versus organic difficulty. Modal difficulty being, just easy, normal, hard kind of difficulty selection. Organic difficulty being a difficulty mode or a set section or an ability to change the difficulty of the game depending on the actions of the player. So, for example, organic difficulty would be, oh, I'm having difficulty with this fight. Let me take along this potion, or let me use this game system, this summoning, or this other person. Let me play this game online. Let me do something to make it easier for me. And so that's kind of an organic way to make the game easier for you as a player. And I really like that little talk, and I really like examinations of game mechanics. I think that that's something that is really worth investigating, especially with this video series. Kind of examining specific game mechanics and the feasibility and usefulness of them. So this particular video is talking about dynamic difficulty sliding, which is a little different from the organic and modal difficulties. The idea that I had for dynamic difficulties, where the game actively is watching the player and watching his experience to see exactly how good of a player he is, and thereby adjust the difficulty on the fly. Like, for example, say you're playing kind of a standard third-person action game, and the game spawns 5 enemies in front of you. You manage to take them all out, and you defeat them all in a matter of 5 seconds. You don't take any damage. Well, you're a pretty good player then. So the next enemies could be more advanced. The game could say, okay, well, since you're pretty good, since you managed to take down so many of the enemies so quickly with so little difficulty, let me make it so that the enemies move or react faster. Let me make it so the enemies shoot more. Let me make it so the enemies take cover. Let me make it so the enemies look for health packs. Let me make it so the enemies flank you. And you notice the things I'm adding is not just simple, let me make it so the enemies have more health. No, not something where I'm just tweaking the game out of your favor, where the enemies are just harder to take down because they take more hits. They become bullet sponges, or they become 100 million HP bosses, even though they're a rat or something like that. I'm talking about the enemies behaving in a more sly and cunning manner because you're a more sly and cunning player. So because you have better tactics, because you're using more tactics, the enemies become harder to the point where you need to use those tactics. It doesn't really make sense if you can combo from using a sword into using a shield if you never have to do that in the game. So the enemies make you necessitate that because they learn that that you need to use it, or they learn that you are using it, so they figure out, okay, let me go ahead and make it so you can use that actively in the game. So as an example, kind of a side-scrolling shooter, let's say R-Type. R-Type was a game, side-scrolling, ship shooter, where you were flying a ship on the left and you had these ships coming in from the right, and you would shoot the ships, and you might get little power-ups and things from time to time. It's kind of a slight little dynamic difficulty. I think that if you were on the screen on the screen and there was a lot of enemies and a lot of bullets and things, and you died, the enemies, like, the screen would basically wipe. I don't know if it was for R-Type in particular, but in that kind of a game, the screen would wipe, and you would end up with either somewhere around that point, either before or after or in the middle of where you were, but basically you wouldn't have any enemies. So you would have like a second or two of basically you just flying alone on the screen before some more enemies and more bullets came. So you had a little bit of range, a little bit of time to adjust yourself and to kind of reorient yourself before you went back into attacking and back into the game. So that was kind of a slight dynamic difficulty in that it didn't just say, oh, you died, let me put you back 5 seconds ago, exactly where you were 5 seconds ago, with exactly the same numbers of bullets, exactly the same places on screen, all that stuff. Because that would be kind of hard if you were, an inch away from a bullet, and then you died a minute later, and then it put you back an inch away from that bullet. That's not really fair. But if it puts you back where you were a minute ago, but with nothing on screen, well, that's kind of a dynamic difficulty, and that allows you to kind of ramp up to where you were now, or where you are now. So in that kind of example, the game pretty much reorients itself and kind of buffers the experience so that you don't always have to be on your toes. You know, you die and then you have to be more on your toes than when you're playing the game because you don't know what's going to happen on the next screen. So that experience is something else. I think the goal of a game is to be fun, and the goal of a challenging game is to be challenging for everyone. So you don't want to make a game like, for example, I don't know if you've heard of it, but I Want to Be the Guy is a game where basically it's challenging to the point of mind-numbingly, soul-crushingly, I mean just mind-crushingly, horribly, horribly hard game, where it's unfair. If you're trying to make that kind of game, then you can make that kind of game. If you're trying to make a difficult game, then you don't want it to be where it's unfair or where a good player feels challenged and a bad player feels it's unfair. I think that, you know, that's why you have modal difficulty. That's why you have, you know, organic difficulty, so that people who are having trouble can go and say, well, I'm having trouble, let me make this easier for myself somehow. If it's a matter of using this thing that I only get every, you know, 5 levels, let me use it now because I feel like I need it now. Well, that's up to the player to decide. Or, you know, oh, well, I'm stinking on normal, I'm stinking on hard, let me push it back to, you know, easy. Well, that's up to the player. So that allows everyone to play the game and enjoy it, regardless of their skill level. And basically, I'm just suggesting that, but by the computer. So it can say, okay, you just stunk up the joint when it came to this last level. Let me go ahead and make the next level easier for you. Or, you know, you were really good on this level. Let me make the next level slightly harder because you're having, you know, kind of an easy time. Let me make it more challenging. So it's kind of watching you and kind of trying to gauge what kind of player you are, and so present you with the primary and kind of attempt at a perfect game where it's just challenging enough, not too easy, not too difficult, but just challenging enough to give you a challenge and keep you on your toes, keep you watching, keep you playing, but not to the point where it's like, okay, I have to come back, you know, hundreds of times to play the game. Like if you're trying to make a, you know, ridiculously hard kind of game, then you could kind of weight things differently so that if it's a lot of deaths, you know, you're kind of going for and a lot of failures, then you can say, well, you know, 5 to 10 failures is a really good player. You know, 10 to 50 players is a really okay player or an average player. You know, 50 up, you know, failures is a horrible player. And basically, if you get 50 up, you know, failures within a certain time period, then basically the game will kind of scale back. If you get 5 deaths, then the game will scale up, and you can kind of, you know, allow the game to have some fun with the player and weight a little differently, depending on how the player plays. So that's basically my idea, is just, or the idea that I kind of wanted to talk about was just dynamic difficulty sliding. And I'm not sure if a lot of games use this mechanic. I'm not sure if a lot of games use this mechanic besides the actual like AI implementation of it. Like, you know, if the, you know, how the player plays, you do kind of see a few of these kind of things. Like, for example, in Pokemon, you'll pick, you know, a Charmander, and your rival will pick a Squirtle. You'll pick a Squirtle, and your rival will pick the Venusaur or the Bulbasaur. And so naturally, your rival will pick the one that you're weak against. That's kind of a slight, you know, thing in that your rival doesn't pick a neutral Pokemon or the Pokemon that you have an advantage against. It'll pick the Pokemon that you're weak against. It seems like that. I think that happens every time. So that's kind of a dynamic difficulty in the opposite direction. It's very simple, but it's basically, it always will pick the one that you're weak against. So every battle, you have to either be overpowered and just say, you know, I'm a Charmander and he's got, or, you know, I'm a Charmeleon or whatever, and he's got a Squirtle and I just don't care. And I'm level, you know, 90 and he's level, you know, 14. Water gun, super effective, 1 HP, I don't care. And you just blast through like that, or you switch Pokemon, you have to switch up the tactic, because it just, you can't just attack head on. Level 5, you know, Squirtle versus level 20 Squirtle versus level 20 or whatever it is. Level 20, you know, ordinary water Pokemon versus level 20 ordinary fire Pokemon. You know, the water one will win, basically. So you kind of have to think about how can you beat this thing. So that allows the player to play a little differently. And so I don't see a lot of games that do this kind of dynamic difficulty thing where it's like the character or the AI will choose different tactics or choose different mechanics or ideas, you know, to kind of work with as it plays against the player and sees how good the player is. The game should be challenging. The game should be something that's not overly simple or overly easy. It should be something that kind of gets the player playing, that makes the player lose a few times, that, you know, gets the player, you know, player's blood pumping and mind churning as to how the game plays. That's just the idea that I had. If you have any ideas for future Let's Discuss videos, please feel free to share that idea in the comments. If you have any ideas of games that kind of do this dynamic difficulty sliding that you can think of, I would like to hear about them as well. That'd be a really nice thing to read up on. So anyway, thank you very much for listening to me, SolarLune, talk about different ideas that I would like to discuss. See ya!